Welcome to the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community Podcast. I'm here with my guests, Nina. How do I say it? Mutegi? Did I say it right?
That's right, Mutegi.
Nina Mutegi. I'm your host, Patrice Sage. And today we're going to talk about innovating education in Kenya. This is an interesting discussion because I've invited Nina because she recently won our biblical entrepreneurship competition in Kenya. And so she's going to be the person representing Kenya at the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship International Business Plan Competition, regional Africa Business Plan Competition in Kenya. And so she hopes to win. She'll be competing against Madagascar and against Congo, the only English-speaking country in the regional competition. And then she hopes to represent Africa at the global competition in August. Well, Nina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Patrice. It's great to be here.
Well, Nina, I'm going to start a little bit backwards, change this right to it before we get into the organization. You recently won the International Business Plan, the Kenya Business Plan Competition in Kenya. And that led me to have you come to our podcast and hear your story. How was that experience for you?
Wow, that was a real mix of highs and lows, Patrice. There was so much preparation that went into the competition. So I remember the day itself, I was working hard to get my presentation ready. I'm a bit of a last minute person, so I didn't do my homework when I should have. So I ended up doing quite a lot towards the end, and the pressure was high, but it was exhilarating. It was very exciting. But more importantly, the outcome of actually participating in the competition meant that I had to understand the business. Mirema School, I needed to understand it in and out to be able to actually present and talk about it in that much detail. So I'm still on a high about it. And I think especially in the season of COVID-19, it's really good to have that happen. Definitely a good thing.
Wow, excellent. You know, it's interesting. You talked about the procrastination, and some people are like that. You get that energy when you feel the pressure of time, of deadline, right? You're one of those people, right?
Yes, absolutely. I always have been, actually.
There's some students or some people who feel like it's not fair that they're diligent throughout the program, they do their homework and so forth. They're the teacher's pet, and then people like you know, kind of. In their mind, slack off along the way, and they come out and they win. I mean, I've seen so many stories like this. How do you feel about that? Is that a fair statement?
I don't know that it's fair, Patrice. I think what happened for us at Mirema School is as soon as I started the BE course, things started to happen in my mind, and I started to understand things differently. And suddenly there was a window to change a lot of what was going on in the school. So we went through a whole process. We changed the kind of contracts we offer. We changed the organogram. We changed so many things during the course of the BE course that while I was doing it, that took up so much time making that happen. So the actual homework was done practically, I'd like to think. It's still a work in progress, and so that is why it was so difficult. But in all honesty, my personality type is last minute, and I've been talking to my mentors about it to see how I can get better on that. There's always room for improvement.
You are a true leader. I love when a leader comes out and really own their stuff, and that says a lot about you, and that's real dynamic. But it's not just you. I've seen this through our competition, where people with charisma and just dynamo and and so forth, and throughout the program, and they just show up, and usually their ability to wow the judges and get that thing there. So it's a gift for sure, and you use it well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, the international competition is a little different. You're not dealing with a different scale. Sometimes what works locally may not work internationally. And so let's first talk regionally. So what are you going to do different to prepare for that regional competition?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going to call you and get some tips on that, if I may. I'm going to liaise with my local mentors. I've got a great team here. Frank Kitonga has been superb, a mentor, a friend, a brother now. And anybody else who's been in this competition, I'll be buying them lunch, even though now it might not be a physical lunch. We might do lunch together on a Zoom call so that I can get tips. And I'll just give it everything I've got. I've been challenged to bring the trophy home, and I intend to give it all I've got.
Awesome. Well, you got to get past Congo and Madagascar.
We are coming. Kenya is coming.
I love it. Well, Nina, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Kenya is bringing it.
Amen. Amen to that. Nina, let's talk about the school. So tell us a bit about the school. When did it get started, and what is the school's focus?
Okay, so the school started in 1998. The school was started by our parents, Mr. and Mrs. Mutegi. So I am one of 3 of their children. And so when they started the school, they were joined at the school by my younger sister, who has been assisting in the management, working with them for the last, I think, is it 8 years? And then I came along and joined the school, and then they have completely handed the business over. So we're 2nd generation directors. My sister and I work most actively in the business, but we also have a brother who is on the board. He's a non-executive member of the board. And that's basically the structure of the school. But the way we're moving the business now is we're going into more of a corporate governance model where we're inviting non-family members to join the school so that we can run it professionally, we can bring it up in terms of the standards and quality of how we run the business. So when the school started, we only had 3 kids. And I think when I look back on it, my parents had the biggest challenge because they had to convince people to bring their children to a school that had no children. 3 kids, and then you're still trying to bring more kids into the business. I think they had a really uphill battle there in getting the school to grow. And one of those 3 children was a boy that had special needs. So the school was not intended to have any inclusion or integrative models for special needs. But what happened is that this boy, his name is Ronnie, had a sister in the school. So he would come to school to bring his sister to school on a regular basis, and then he would go home, and the highlights of his day was bringing his sister to school and picking her up after the school day. So mom has a big heart for special needs, and she asked, so what does Ronnie do all day? And he just goes home and passes the day. And she then just decided, okay, starting next term, Ronnie comes to school, stays in school with his sister, and then they can get picked up together. So she didn't have a plan, to be honest, at the time. She just knew that there had to be a place for children like Ronnie. And that's how the special needs story in Mirema School took off. So we have a 10% allocation for children with special needs, and we use an inclusive and integrated model, meaning that the children with special needs, some of them are able to be in a classroom with regular children, but some of them need to have specialized teachers. So we use different models to make it work for them.
Wow, and that's truly innovative. Your parents were ahead of the curve, because when it comes to school with special need, Africa, that's not exactly a strength for Africa. Would you agree with that, or is that another statement?
That's a very, very fair statement. In Africa, I think the way our culture works, children with special needs have not been welcomed. I guess looking back, there was the belief that they were a curse, or they were, a bad omen for the society. In different cultures, you'd find sometimes they wouldn't even be allowed to live, let alone grow up in the community. So we've come from a very dark place in terms of inclusion of special needs in the society. So I agree with you completely. Mom and dad were ahead of everybody else when it came to this. And there was a lot of stigma as well, because there was a time when people wouldn't want to bring their children to our school because they believed that the children with special needs would harm their children, or they branded it as a special needs school. The inclusive model was not embraced immediately. it's been a work in progress where now there's more trust and there's more of a picture of success. So then people want to be associated with that.
What was so unique about your parents that enabled them to be so drawn to do this? Was it A, are there anyone with special needs in your family, either with the children, or B, is it something about their personality, their sense of calling and passion? What enabled them to do this, you think?
I don't think there's any sort of clear history of special needs in the family. We have one cousin who has Down syndrome, but she grew up in the rural setting and it worked for her there. I think when I think about my parents, they've always been people they've lived their lives outside the box. So they grew up in a they were brought up in very humble beginnings, very difficult family situations. And when they came together, they were able to do things people still wonder about today. So they got a lot of things right. They got many things wrong as well, but the things they did well, they did exceptionally well. Mom in particular, we always say she's got like the Midas touch. Anything that she puts her mind to, she will make work. You know, if she goes into farming, she makes that work. If she does something else, she makes that work. And where Dad comes in is he's the one who comes up with the ideas, he sets the vision, and she implements. So I think it's the way they work together that has made the difference.
How unique is that kind of partnership in a Kenya or even Africa setting? Husband and wife collaborating that way.
Very, very unique. I mean, I don't want to paint it like it's a perfect picture and everything is, you know, wonderful. It's not a fairy tale. They've had their share of challenges, but I think for their story, if you know, sometimes they would take us to where they first started out. It was almost like a slum area in Eastlands, part of Nairobi. And when you look at the way they've been able to amass wealth, it's actually phenomenal. I say to my siblings that I don't think in our generation we'll be able to pull off anything that's phenomenal. In our case, we have to grow what they've started. They planted the seed, and so we have to grow that. But I think they broke the boundaries, they broke the barriers. They were not supposed to be as successful as they were. They made many mistakes. They lost some things along the way, but they're together still, and they're quite happy to now let us run with things.
Wow. I'd love to have your parents one day be interviewed here and kind of talk about some of that. That'll be a great story. Would you mind telling them? I'd love to interview them.
No, you need to give them double the airtime.
We'll make that work.
Yes,
so
yes.
Your second generation, and statistically,
yes.
You are the underdog, right? Normally, first generation builds it, second generation squanders it. I'm second generation as well. My business is not my family business, but I'm also a part of a family business where we are part of second generation. And I'll be honest, in my family, we're not doing too well, right? We're struggling with our ability to go. I'm gonna make my siblings watch this particular podcast to be inspired by it. What made you guys unique? What was so unique? What did you guys? What happened with you guys that's not happening with us, with my family, or families like ours? What was the thing we unique? I mean,
okay, I think it's a couple of things, different things. I think that's a tough question, Patrice. I think firstly, our parents have been very, very willing to hand the business over. So they were very willing to let us take over. And when they took a step back, then we were able to actually set the pace. Sometimes having two generations working within the business causes a lot of conflict because then you have different ideas. I spent a lot of time in the UK, and I got to work in the healthcare space and in corporates, you know, across mostly in Europe and in the Middle East. And so I came in with a lot of ideas. Now, my ideas versus maybe Dad's ideas wouldn't really work together because we are looking at things from a very, very different perspective. So when he was able to say, okay, as long as you don't lose everything, run the show, then it allows us to be ourselves. So my sister and I have very different personalities as well, but because we're from the same generation, we can see, you know, where things needed to be fixed. So number one, it was just the willingness of the first generation to hand over to the second generation and to trust us with the business, because then when you have that, then the responsibility sits solidly with you. You can't blame anybody else. And then the second thing I think is just, it has taken a long time for us to understand that we have a very unique situation. We have been given a gift of a business, a successful business, and we had to get over ourselves. Let me speak mostly for myself. So I went to good schools. Our parents invested hugely in our education. And then when I finished high school, I went abroad. I went to the UK and I lived there for 23 years. So I've had a lot of exposure during that time. So when I decided to come back home, it wasn't even a choice. It was almost like a crossroads of life, where sometimes I think God just puts you in a situation, and it was almost like the prodigal son, where you ask yourself, why am I struggling here in a land where it's hand to mouth? I'm struggling to bring my daughter up. I'm struggling to break this glass ceiling that is very difficult sometimes to get past. And then I just thought, you know, why don't you go home? And it wasn't me. I believe it was the Spirit that spoke to me, because the decision was so almost overnight, you know. I had always said I would settle abroad. We bought a house. We were comfortable. And the decision to come back home was almost overnight. So I came home 6 months after thinking of it, and scouted around. And a year later, I was back in Africa after being away from the age of 17.
Wow.
So why I'm giving that story is that acceptance of, okay, here is something that has been prepared for you. Why do you have to struggle and look for your own glory and say, you know, I started my own thing, I'm successful in my own right? I had to shift my mindset and understand that I can be successful and just take the business from where it is to another level. So there is that. And I know my sister went through that as well, because neither of us are in education. So she was in the beauty industry, and she gave up, you know, quite a lot to come and work in the school. So it's that acceptance and willingness, and that has also been further sort of heightened by doing the BE course and understanding identity and purpose, and accepting that this is my assignment right now and I am going to give it my best.
Wow. Now, but one thing you kind of talked about, but you didn't go in detail about, which is preparation. I mean, that there also was, you and your sister in your own right had done some things. Let's talk about that. How were you prepared for this? And then I want to get, Nina, to this idea of you coming back home, because I had another guest last week. We talked about that, you know, versus settling for being a pumper in a foreign land with luxury that you don't own, right? Choosing to go home and be a king no matter how little we have. But before we get to that, what prepared you for this, and why you are not your sister as CEO? I know I'm getting to some family toast here, but you know, I got to ask the question.
Okay. So the preparation was just almost all the wilderness experiences of my life, the highs, the lows. My dream was to become a doctor when I was a little girl. And when I think about the reasons for that, is because I wanted to add value. I wanted to make people feel better. But of course, on further probing with identity and purpose, now I understand that it was a need in me to perhaps be thanked and be told that you've done well, Nina, we value you, we appreciate you. Thanks to identity and purpose for that realization. So that was the dream. And so when I went to the UK, I ended up doing nursing instead. And I did a lot of work there in different capacities, and as an independent nurse, in groups, in a ward setting. I had the opportunity to set up patient support programs for pharmaceutical companies where you were pushing for adherence to medication. So the challenge for many people with long-term chronic conditions is they don't adhere to medication, which means that they don't have very good outcomes. So I had the opportunity to communicate with people, mostly in Europe. I set up programs in Europe, Germany, Spain, the UK, different parts of the UK. I helped set up a program in the US. I set up 2 programs in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And so mixing with different cultures and looking at how people sort of think and the things that drive us to behave the way we behave pushed me to have an interest in health psychology. So behavior change techniques and understanding why we choose the behaviors we choose. So I've always had that maybe interest in understanding the human psyche. What is it that drives us? So in all of that, I think the preparation was there. So, looking at how to work within a corporate setting, but bring in soft skills, soft sort of sciences into that was how I was wired. But just who I am, I'm a very task-oriented person, and my dad often describes me as a person who doesn't give up easily. He'll say that if Nina gets her hands on something, she will push through to the end. And I think that's true. That's a good way of describing who I am. And so when I came back, this is the sensitive bit now. I think my sister will, I think she'll say that I'm saying it as it is. So my sister and I were initially working at the same level. So we were both directors. We split the departments evenly and we said, you take this department, I'll take this department. Now, we're very differently wired. And the problem is, in a business, everything has to work together. And there has to be one person with whom the buck stops. And we had a lot of friction, we had a lot of indecision. It was taking so long to make decisions because there was nobody to say the final yes or no. And when we looked at our different strengths and weaknesses, it was, and I agree, it was found that I would be better because I would be managing the financial picture, the bigger picture. My sister is a people-oriented person. She's great with training, capacity building, inspiration. Now, those are skills that she's able to use as the COO, so she's the Chief Operations Officer. But sometimes, looking at, for example, COVID-19 period, we are having to make decisions about putting staff on unpaid leave. Some of those decisions are really tough, and I don't know that it's easier for me, but my personality, allows me to make those decisions perhaps a bit more firmly, whereas she has a big heart and she'll think about people much more.
Wow. What a great balance. Now, was it tough to coming to this place where, what a great insight that you both uncovered. How easy was it to kind of come to that place as a family?
It was not easy. It was not easy. We had a lot of conflict, and that is actually what triggered this, because we realized the business was suffering. So me being the CEO doesn't mean that I get to call the shots on the family side of things. I'm still the sister, I'm still the auntie, I'm still the daughter. But from a business perspective, it was clear that we needed to make those decisions, and everybody agreed. What we couldn't agree on initially was how it was going to work. Do we have different salaries? We obviously have different job descriptions. So it's a work in progress. I've spoken to families who are going through this as well, and it's a very, very, very sensitive.
When I have a succession training that I do seminar. When I do that in Kenya, I like for you to be one of on my panel, because you've twice. Now, so let's talk a bit about BE. Well, let's talk about BE and how that prepared you as well, and what led you, with your experience and your training, to still want more training and this way pick something biblical.
Yes. Okay. So our background is we were brought up in a Christian family, but to be fair, I think a lot of it was it wasn't a very strict Christian setup. So we were brought up to know the Lord. We were brought up to know what is right and what is wrong. I think for me as an individual, that right and wrong concept has really been important, because after I left home, I was 17 years old when I left. And I was thrown into a space where I could do anything I wanted. I had no supervision. It was up to me to do what I wanted. So I went full cycle through my university days and my 20s and 30s, where I got off the path and eventually came back into the space of understanding that actually, if your life is not centered in Christ, you'll always have that gap that is not, you lack some maybe peace or some serenity or some feeling of completion when you haven't done things the right way. So when I came back to Kenya, I found that Kenya was a very different place than what I remembered it to be. So there were issues with integrity, there were issues with trusting people. You have to be careful who you liaise with, who you partner with. You have to be careful, you can be conned or ripped off, that kind of thing. And you know, having lived abroad for many years, I think I was gullible because I didn't know some of the tricks. I wasn't very streetwise. So, you know, everyone around me was cautioning me, be careful, Nina, people are not what you think they are. I remembered Kenya from a child's perspective, where I would remember holidays with my aunties. I remembered things very differently, but you know, being a child and being an adult is a very different thing. So so when I came back, I struggled to find my friends. And even when I found them, it had been so long. I struggled to form networks with people because I couldn't really trust people. So when I find a space where I find like-minded people, I feel settled very quickly. And that's what happened for me with BE. When I met Frank and the team in my class, I realized these are people who are looking for answers, who face the same challenges we face at Mirema School. And so I just felt right at home. And I felt this were a group I could trust. I could honestly say the things we had done that were not right and the things that we had done that were successful without feeling like we're bragging. So that's the community that I've found within BE that just allows me to be settled and comfortable, because I know we all want the same thing.
Wow, that is incredible. Nina, I have so many more questions for you. I'm going to have to do a part 2 of this podcast because our time is coming up. And
wow.
you're just so good. You're just so good. But I got 2 more questions for you. The first one is, so what have you gotten from the training that has complemented what you already knew prior from the biblical entrepreneurship classes?
So I think in my mind, the concept of business and Christ were not something I put together. I found them, you know, they were very separate until I realized that actually, if you do business in a biblical way, then that's the answer to everything. So what I have found is just the nuggets of business advice that exist in the Bible. You know, talking about being profitable is a biblical concept. That, you know, you always think being Christ-like or godly means that you have to give things away for free, and some of those concepts blew my mind. And that's the biggest thing, to understand that it is biblical to do your business in using the principles from the Bible. That's been the biggest takeout for me.
Wow, and kudos for. By the way, if you're watching this, if you'd like to join the class that Nina was a part of over there in Nairobi, Kenya, just go to the Nehemiah Project website. Go to nehemiahecommunity.com, or go to Nehemiah Project Kenya website, and you'll be able to get in touch with Frank and connect with the next class. Now, Nina, would you advise, as others listening to you in their first generation, preparing the second generation, third generation, would you advise that families have their children work away from home before coming to the family business? It seems to work for you, or do you think that was an absolute?
I think definitely that would be a plus. I've spent some time talking to businesses that are in their third and fourth generation, and what they've done in the Asian community, it's worked very well, the succession planning. And I think I would want us to set up our family charter in the same way, where before you join the family business, you go and work outside the business, so that you actually build some resilience, you become accountable to somebody who is not a family member, so that they, the next generation builds a bit of fortitude before they join the business, and then they come in with new ideas. I think what has worked very well for our second generation is that we worked elsewhere and we were able to bring those principles into the business and understand that it could be better and take it to the next level. So I would think that's a good model, where you have a minimum period of experience elsewhere before you come and work in the family business.
And you didn't come with your hand out, and so you didn't come needy, right? That's also the issue. The family business seemed to be a default for mediocrity because we didn't succeed somewhere else or can't succeed somewhere else, the family business, versus it being where we bring assets, we come in giving.
That's a very, very key point, because if you come in wanting, needing, then you will also not have the respect of the previous generation. That's a fact. If you come in, to be helped, you have everything done for you, then the way that you'll even be perceived by the previous generation will be, this was a last resort for you, you didn't do well elsewhere. And also for you as a person, you need to know that if I don't work at Mirema, I could be employed elsewhere, I could start a business, do my own thing, and that changes the dynamic completely.
Wow, I love it. Nina, This is so good. This is the second Kenya I'm talking to. I'm having to do 2 podcasts because you guys are just so good. Something about Kenya. So, Nina, we are in the midst of COVID-19. I need to ask this question, and we're gonna kind of unfold it. Would you mind coming back, Nina? Do you mind coming back?
No, I'd love to.
Yeah, we're gonna unfold it because you're having to navigate COVID-19. Actually, for the sake of time, let me just we'll save that. So I'm gonna have Nina come back next week. We'll talk about the impact of COVID-19 on her school, how she's navigated that as a CEO, and we'll talk about what her forecast look like beyond COVID-19. So be on the lookout for that. But Nina, there are people watching. I'm going to stick your by the way, if they want to know about joining the school as a student, as a parent, so how do they get in touch with you? Where do they go to find out how to become a student at the school?
Okay, so we're on social media. You can find us on Facebook. We have a website, www.miremaschool.ac.ke. And on there, you'll find information about the school. You'll find our contact details. We are available even during this COVID-19 period. We're enrolling students. We have an e-learning program that's starting on the 12th of May. So by all means, please look for us. We'll be happy to answer any questions, and we can give you a tour when COVID passes by. We can give you a tour.
Awesome, I love it. Nina, there are people watching this podcast from all over the world. They're so inspired by your story, your ability to take the helms, second generation, and they want to know some advice. What advice would you give them as they themselves try to prepare the next generation, or as they're trying to lead at their level? What advice would you give them?
I would say for the next generation, give them options. So when we look at the third generation, we are looking at giving them options to become executive members of the business or the board, or non-executive. I think it is a time when we have to look at people's gifts and abilities. Not everybody will be suited to work in the family business, but everybody can certainly benefit from it. So look at the structure so that it isn't compulsory. Everybody has different gifts and talents to bring, and it might be that they add value at different points in their lives. So build a structure that allows for that, but also allow your children to be part of the business. Let them do small tasks or activities. With our children currently, with second generation working into the third generation, we give them little projects, and we pay them for that once in a while, not all the time, so that they build an interest. Sometimes they're reluctant, but I think if they have the exposure, they can then make choices as to whether they want to join the business actively or passively.
Good advice. I got my daughters getting involved in the EMI project when they were 12 years old. And they used to say, Dad, you're too young. I said, you're never too young to work. Well, today, one is 16, one is 19, and they're both working in the EMI. That's their, when they're not in school, they're working here, and they're great help to me. Very good help to me.
Yes, yes, good. That's excellent.
And they like earning their own money.
That's the thing, and then you let them spend it how they want to.
Not all of it how they want to, but most of it.
Not all of it. That's true. Not all of it. Not all of it.
Well, Nina, what a joy. You know what? Your family made the right choice. You are such a, first of all, you're beautiful, you're poised, but also you're filled with humility. And that is a great combination of leader. So I'm gonna have you come back and we're gonna talk about how you guys are handling COVID-19 and how it's impacting you and what your forecasts that you see. Nina, how do they get in touch with you again? Please give them the website again for the school.
Yeah, website is www.miremaschool.ac.ke. Mirema is MIREMA. So miremaschool.ac.ke.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Well, friends, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I have been blessed. I mean, this has just ministered to my soul as I think about my own family, as I think about my own organization. And so if you would like to participate in the same kind of training that Nina participated in the training program, whether you are in Kenya or abroad, just visit our website, nehemiahproject.org, nehemiahproject.org, or go to nehemiahecommunity.com, nehemiahecommunity.com, and there you can learn how we can come alongside you, provide you training, coaching, and access to capital. And by the way, be a part of this community of entrepreneurs so that we can transform the world together. Also, here's my prayer for you. May the Lord bless you. And may you live your life and run your business in such a way that one day you can hear those wonderful words. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. He'll make you rule over much. God bless you. Nina, thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrice. It's been a pleasure.